Welcome to Campfire Horror. Tonight's tale is called The Visitor That Knocked with the Fog. The graveyard hours are the thinnest time of night. Silence grows too heavy and the world feels one step away from breaking. For Deputy Carson, silence was already heavy with guilt. One call he hadn't answered, one family he couldn't save. But when the fog rolled in and the knock came steady at his door, he realized silence doesn't forgive. It remembers. The storm had torn through and left the town drowned in silence. The station glowed with candles, their wax pooling on Carson's desk, the corners swallowed in shadow. He sat there, the quiet pressing in. He had missed a call once before, a family murdered on the North Road while the phone sat unanswered. Some said no one could have saved them. Others said that wasn't the point. Carson didn't argue either way. He carried it. Nights like this, the silence made sure he carried it. Then the line hissed, and the operator's voice cut through the static. "Deputy, I'm patching a call, but this trunk line shouldn't even be live." A woman's voice followed, soft, wandering. I can't see. It's dark. I keep looking for the door, but there isn't one." Carson straightened, gripping the receiver. "Stay calm. Tell me your name. Where are you now?" Her breath stammered, trembling like someone lost in a place without walls. "I called. I know I called for help. I know I did." Then the line cracked into static and went silent. Carson's hand spun the dial at once. The operator answered faint and shaky. "Trace it. Where did that call come from?" "North Road, Deputy. That house." A pause. But listen, storms twist the wires. Crosstalk echoes. You can't always trust what you hear after weather like this. Could be nothing. But Carson knew the house. Everyone did. He called another officer over the line, his voice tight but steady. "Take a unit out. North Road. Check that house." The candles strained tall. Carson sat back, waiting. The minutes dragged, each one louder than the last. He couldn't sit still. He stood, crossed the room, opened a file drawer. The case file lay there, heavy as ever. He set it on the desk, stared at the name typed across the front. His jaw tightened. "You called once already," he muttered into the quiet. "I didn't answer. That's on me." The silence didn't argue. He turned the file aside, paced a slow circle through the shadows, sat again, rubbed his temples, checked the clock though he knew the hands hadn't moved far. Finally, the phone rattled again. Carson snatched it up. The young officer's voice came through, damp with rain and static. "House is dark, Deputy, empty. Oh, lamps, no footprints, no signs anyone's been there in weeks. Just get out here." Carson closed his eyes, the receiver warm against his ear. "Copy." He replaced it slowly, the words hanging in the room long after the line went dead. The candles guttered, the silence pressed closer. Carson sat alone with it, staring at nothing, knowing it hadn't been nothing at all. The station sat heavy with silence. The candles burned lower, dripping wax down their sides, and the clock on the wall ticked louder than it had any right to. Carson leaned back in his chair, staring at the receiver. The call had come through. He couldn't deny that. The operator traced it, the officer confirmed the address, and the house was empty. All the facts lined up. But the voice... He rubbed his temples hard enough to ache. Did I hear her? Static can play tricks. Storm lines bleed, overlap, repeat old words. Echoes. That's what the operator had said. Echoes. A call without a voice is one thing, but he hadn't imagined it, had he? Her words clung to him. "I know I called for help." Carson stood and began pacing. His boots struck the old floorboards in a rhythm that felt too loud. He checked the cells, checked the locks, anything to move. The station breathed around him, shadows shifting when his back was turned. He caught himself muttering into the air, as if arguing with the silence that wanted the last word. The call was real. The voice, maybe not. Maybe not. The phone rang. Carson froze. He grabbed the receiver like it might vanish if he hesitated. This time there was no operator, no warning. Just the child's voice, clear, direct. "Why didn't you save us?" Carson's breath left him. The line clicked dead. His fingers trembled as he spun the dial, calling the operator back. "Another call," he said sharply. "Trace it." The operator's tone was firm, almost insulted. "Deputy, no. My board's been dead all night. Only one call came through, the one I patched you earlier. Nothing else lit. Nothing else at all." Carson set the receiver down slowly. The silence that followed was worse than any storm. The walls seemed to lean closer. The candles hissed as if smothered by invisible hands. Carson sat alone in the weight of it, and for the first time that night, he wasn't sure if the voice had been real, or if it had always been waiting in his own mind. Carson sat hunched over the desk, the receiver still warm in his hand. The silence in the room was no longer empty, it was waiting. But had it really spoken? He whispered to himself, as though testing the weight of the words. "Why didn't you save us?" He shivered at his own voice, echoing them back. Had he hurt a child, or only his guilt feeding him? Storms could twist wires, bend sounds. Guilt could do worse. Maybe the operator was right. Maybe there had been only one call. Carson rose, restless, the chair legs scraping the wood. He paced the length of the station, back and forth, boots striking in a rhythm too sharp for the silence. He checked the cell locks, though none were occupied. He set his hand on the case file again, fingers pressed hard enough to crease the cover. The words wouldn't leave him. The phone sat quiet, the candles guttered. He turned from the desk, walking toward the far wall as if the silence were pushing him. His reflection caught briefly in the darkened window glass, pale and tired. Then he noticed it fog, not the gentle kind that drifts like breath. This rolled heavy through the street, swallowing posts, pavement, and houses in a matter of minutes. It pressed against the glass like a tide, pale and unholy, until the world outside was erased. The station had become an island, stranded in a sea of white. Carson stepped closer, his hand against the sill. The fog didn't bead, didn't smear. It only waited. Behind him, the clock began to chime, once, twice, 3 times. The sound rang hollow through the empty room. And then came a knock, measured, patient, certain. The knock hung in the silence, steady and patient. Carson's hand hovered over the lock, his heartbeat drumming in his ears. The fog pressed against the glass, swallowing every familiar landmark of the street. The world beyond the station had vanished. He unbolted the door. It swung open slowly, groaning on its hinges. A man stood in the threshold, half hidden by the rolling light. His coat was soaked through, water dripping from the brim of his hat, his face shadowed by the candlelight spilling from the station. He didn't step forward. He simply waited, as if certain the invitation would come. Carson's duty stirred first. The storm could circle back. Fog meant damp air, and damp air could mean more rain. Another blow. You didn't leave a man out in that. "Come in," Carson said, his voice rough from the weight of the night. He stepped back, motioning the man inside. No sun standing out there. "It's safer in here." The man crossed the threshold without hesitation. The fog seemed to lean in with him, curling around the doorframe until Carson shut it tight again. The candles quivered. The silence shifted. The man stood in the middle of the room, water trailing from his coat onto the floorboards. For a moment, his face looked familiar, a likeness that pulled at Carson's memory but stayed just out of reach. Only then did he speak, his voice calm and steady, carrying a weight that was both sympathetic and unbearable. "It's heavy, isn't it?" the man said softly. "To be the only one awake when others call for you." Carson's jaw tightened. His eyes didn't leave the man's hands, training held, even as unease worked at his gut. "It's the job," Carson answered, the words coming out flat, as though that should have been enough to explain everything. The man, or what looked like a man, stood in the glow of the candles, water still dripping from his coat onto the floorboards. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone people use when they mean to soothe, not frighten. "You've carried it long enough," he said, the weight of voices you didn't answer. "It drags at you, doesn't it?" Carson's jaw worked, but his words came flat. "It's the job." The man tilted his head. Candlelight bent across his features strangely, sharp on one side, soft on the other, like his face didn't quite belong to the light. "It doesn't have to be," he whispered. "You don't have to keep it. You can let it go. You could rest, and I could take it for you." Carson's hands flexed against the edge of the desk. His eyes stayed fixed on the man's hands, his training holding steady. "It isn't mine to give," the man smiled faintly. His teeth caught the light a moment too long, the shadow stretching from his jaw not matching the line of his face. "But it is yours to keep. And it's killing you." Carson's chest tightened. He felt the room lean closer, as though the walls themselves were listening. The man stepped forward, his boots leaving no sound on the wood. The air around him cooled, the candle flames bowing as though pulled toward him. For an instant, Carson swore he saw the wall through his outline, faint, like looking through smoke. He blinked hard, and the man was solid again, human again. Familiar, that familiarity dug at him. Carson turned his head, his eyes drifting to the bulletin board where photographs clung by thumbtacks. A family smiled in the summer sun, father, mother, children, all alive in the picture. Carson's breath caught. His gaze snapped back to the man before him. It was the same face, a perfect copy, but drained of warmth. And in that moment, the disguise faltered. The eyes gleamed too bright, the jawline stretched too sharp. The voice that followed seemed to carry 2 tones at once. "I was there when you didn't answer," the man said. "I can be here now, if you'll let me." Carson's throat worked dry. The figure standing in front of him was no longer simply a man, it was a ghost. A copy, a mask pressed too hard onto something that wanted him to believe. And for the first time, Carson realized he wasn't looking at grief. He was looking at something wearing it. The man's face, the father's face, flickered in the candlelight like it couldn't quite hold together. Carson forced himself to stay still, but his body ached to move. "You've kept their voices long enough," the visitor said, his tone still soft, almost merciful. "Let me take them from you." "You don't have to wake in the silence anymore." Carson swallowed hard. "They're not yours to take." The visitor's smile stretched just a little too far, as if skin didn't know where to stop. "Not mine, not yours. Just voices in the dark. They don't belong to anyone now." For a moment, his outline blurred, the wall visible faintly through his shoulders, like smoke. Then it solidified again, stronger, darker. Carson gripped the desk so hard his knuckles whitened. "You think you failed them?" the visitor continued, his voice deepening, a second tone rumbling beneath it. "But what if you never had a choice? What if it was always meant to happen?" Carson's voice cracked, harsher than he meant. "It was my call to answer." The visitor leaned closer. His eyes caught the candlelight, and for a heartbeat, flames burned inside them. "And you didn't." Carson's breath shuddered out. He felt the words strike deep because they were true. Then the visitor's expression softened, almost kindly. "But I can lift it. You don't have to carry them anymore. Just let me take it. Let me take you." The room chilled. The candles hissed as though pressed down by unseen hands. The shadows stretched long, bending wrong across the floor. Carson couldn't tell if the man standing before him was a grieving father's ghost, the devil in borrowed skin, or only his own mind breaking. And then the visitor's voice came low, intimate, impossible to ignore. "Say yes, and the silence will never touch you again." The candles snapped, one by one, plunging the room toward darkness. The candles popped and died, one after another, leaving only a thin, guttering flame on the desk. The shadows closed in. Carson's chest heaved. His hand went to the drawer where his revolver waited, but he didn't pull it. Against grief, guilt, or the devil, a weapon was useless. The visitor stood steady, his face shifting in the half-light. At one glance, he was the grieving father. At another, his features lengthened, cracked, his outline bleeding like smoke. At another, he looked like no one at all, only the shape of silence wearing skin. "You can't carry this alone," the visitor said, his voice low and patient. "It will break you. It already has. Let me take it. Let me take you." Carson shut his eyes, but the words pressed in from every corner. The phone, the silence, the faces in the file. He saw them whether his eyes were open or closed. "I can't," he muttered. His own voice was weak, breaking. "It's mine." The visitor stepped closer. His boots made no sound. His hand, if it was a hand, reached toward Carson's shoulder. Cold air trailed ahead of it, biting through the room. Then came the sound of another door opening. Not from the hall, not from outside. From inside himself. Carson felt the weight in his chest shift, as though something had been pulled loose. The last candle snapped out. Darkness swallowed everything. The station door creaked open the morning light, filling the darkened station with the light of a new day. The hinges complained softly, answered only by the drip of rainwater outside. The day officer stepped in, brushing fog from his shoulders, a steaming cup in his hand. "Carson," he called, voice casual at first. "Power's still down. You ride the storm out all right?" There was no reply. He moved through the quiet, boots thumping against the wood. "Carson," setting his cup down on the desk with a dull thud. He looked around. The place smelled wrong. Not just candle smoke, but something heavier, like burned paper. A Bible lay open on the blotter, half its pages charred black, curling like dead leaves. Ash dusted the desk. Wax had spilled in hard rivers across the paper, but one page had been spared, as though something had shielded it. 2 verses remained untouched. The first whole, "Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me." The second fragmented, the burned edges leaving behind only jagged words that strung themselves into a new line. "He walks in silence, waits in the dark, carries the weight you cannot." The officer frowned, his hand brushing over the ashes. He turned, searching. The chair sat empty. The station was still. Then his eyes fell on the booking log, left open on the desk. Ink fresh in Carson's unmistakable handwriting. Name, Carson Hawley. Charge, booked. Time, 3 o'clock. The officer's mouth went dry. He looked at the chair again, then back to the log. Carson had written himself in. But Carson wasn't there. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Carson faced a ghost, the devil, or only his own guilt? If the flame spoke to you tonight, leave a comment. Let the fire know you were here by liking this video. Subscribe to take your place by the fire before the flame fades. If you want to hear what the fire remembers next, click the video on your screen now.